Can you get more than one? Maybe a dozen. Okay, this is the Finance Subcommittee. We advertised it for 4:30. Anticipating there's another subcommittee for the people watching at home, and this is either now or rebroadcast. Excuse me, we've been waiting for Council Larry. He's stuck in traffic. It's about 4:45, so we are going to proceed with this report. Of course, we're bringing this report forward at the City Council meeting anyway. So with that, Mr. Clerk, if you could call the roll. And
Chairman Elliott?
Here.
Council Larry? Council Milanazzo?
Here.
Two present.
So this is the second of a series of Finance Subcommittee meetings that we're holding regarding the impact of the Lowell High School, cost to both residential and commercial property owners. With that, I've asked, or Mr. Baldwin and his finance team, who was Mr. Conley, and Mr. Healy, I'm sorry, joining us along with Councilor Mercia. So with that, why don't we go right to you, Mr. Baldwin, and go through a discussion, albeit it might be brief, but we'll talk about the impact on commercial taxes, as well as I've asked to get an explanation. I might have to do this might be a good thing at the City Council meeting also, Mr. Baldwin, to discuss the how we shift valuation allowable under the law to minimize residential taxes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the last time that we were here at the Finance Subcommittee, we had a discussion relative to the impact of the Lowell High School project on residential properties. The other side of the equation is obviously the other classifications, commercial, industrial, and personal property. So we've prepared a brief PowerPoint presentation that goes over some of the information. Some of this hopefully will help the folks at home to understand the difference between the classes, and then to give a more full view of what the impact on commercial properties will be. So in Lowell, we have a split tax rate. So there's one rate for residential properties and then a commercial rate for all properties valued in the commercial, industrial, and personal property classifications. The chart that's listed on the PowerPoint slide lays out the fiscal year 2017 valuations for each of those classifications. So you can see that the residential property class is the lion's share of the tax levy for the city at almost $6 billion. However, we have commercial properties at about $560 million, industrial at $326 million, and then personal property, which makes up about $274 million for fiscal 17. So the tax rate for the residential properties, $14.92 in fiscal 17, and the tax rate for the commercial properties is $30.64 per $1,000 of assessed value. So to talk a little bit about the tax shift and how the city of Lowell historically has approached the classifications, Chapter 200 of the Acts of 1988 allows communities to shift up to 1.75% to the CIP, which is the commercial, industrial, personal classifications. Historically, the City Council has used the maximum shift each year in order to ease the burden on the residential classes. So there's a vote called the minimum residential factor that's typically presented to the council concurrent with the tax rate setting process in the late fall, early winter. So just to talk a little more about that, for fiscal 17, before the shift, the residential class makes up about 83.5% of the full and fair cash value assessments. After the shift, it was only about 71%, so it shifts the burden over to the CIP class. So as we did for the, feel free to stop at any time if there's questions or comments. As we did with the residential component of the tax impact of the high school, we put together sort of a distribution chart on commercial properties in the city. It's a much more wide-ranging set of values. However, we tried to group them together to sort of visualize how the properties are laid out. So there's 935 properties, or the largest group are within that $0 to $200,000 value range. From 200,000 to $500,000, there's 404 properties. From $500,000 to $750,000 in value, there's 121 properties. There are 50 properties between $750,000 and $1 million, and then 136 properties between $1 and $5 million. And then we have 17 properties at $5 million and above. So that is a catch-all from $5 million up to, I believe, the highest one is about $87 million. So that's a brief layout, as we did with the residential properties, in order to try to group together what the impact will be.
Could I ask you what that $87 million piece of property is? That
Cross Point.
Okay.
Yeah. So as we did for the residential tax component, we put together some charts that detail the tax impact on different value commercial properties from the 4 different options that the City Council has advanced for consideration of the Lowell High School project. So the $250,000 range was sort of what we came up with as an average, and this would probably represent your mom and pop store, small businesses essentially would fall into this category. The tax impact for a full renovation would be $462.19, all the way up to $588.69 for the Colley site, with option 2 and option 3 kind of falling in between there. For a commercial property tax impact for a $426,000, or roughly $500,000, the full renovation would have an impact of $788.83, up to about $1,000 for the Colley site. And then just finally, for the impact, for a $750,000 commercial property, the full renovation would be a tax impact of $1,386.57, up to, for the new school at Colley, $1,766.07. And for a commercial property in the $1 million range, the tax impact would range from a full renovation impact of $1,941.19 up to, for the Colley site, $2,472.49. So in summary, these tables are meant to sort of show the potential impact. Obviously, these are estimates based on projections, conceptual cost summaries from our OPM and architectural group. So with that, we'll open it for comments and discussion from the subcommittee and the council.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Baldwin. Questions? Councilor Milonazo, then Councilor Marcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I appreciate getting this information. Obviously, it's similar to what we received last week on the residential rate. Has any analysis been done on the tax increment financing properties that are in the city that will be maturing, if you will, or running off, and what positive impact that may have as we go out again 2020, as they start paying their full share of commercial taxes?
We have not done an analysis of that type yet. However, that is a very good suggestion, and it is true that there are a number of TIFs that will be coming off entirely and the value fully coming on, and others where it's incrementally coming on, that we can certainly try to pull together.
Again, I don't know if that's helpful, Mr. Chairman, but I just, again, thinking, down the road, as soon as we pull the trigger on, borrowing $140 million, whatever the number is, does it make sense to try to at least see what that would look like?
So yeah, in the budget, we do calculate the TIFs and how they'll run off, but we haven't done the analysis to incorporate that
Okay.
into the high school project. But it's easy enough.
Okay.
And how many TIFs do we have we approved, or that are still, I mean, they're typically 20 years, right? The ones that we adopt?
Typically. There's a number that have been come online recently. Maycom,
Maycom, Markley, Somerset Industries,
HBC.
Kronos, so through Crosspoint.
Right,
But
It was
there-
about 5.
yeah.
There are a group of others that are a little bit older.
Right.
We certainly can pull together the information on how that, because it will, in summary, sort of ease the impact on both commercial and residential taxes.
Okay, thank you. And then one final question, on the chart on the second page where the heading is Lowell High School Project Commercial Tax Impact, and then you have the number of properties. Are those both commercial and industrial, or is it just commercial?
It's commercial and industrial, but not
Not
personal property. Correct.
Okay, okay. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
So I don't, do we need a motion to get that info? I think that's important information on tax increment financing moving ahead, because, I mean, you have that's additional revenue that typically wouldn't be factored in. Would it on a, so when the assessor, well, the assessor must factor it in on an annual basis. She has those schedules. Okay, never mind. Okay, but I think it'd be helpful in the out years of, when this goes online 2020, what additional revenue are we picking up from some of these TIFs?
We'll be happy to pull that together.
Okay, thank you. Good. Council Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It says average commercial property tax impact, but I don't, so residential isn't involved in this. It's just commercial property tax? We don't have the residential?
Well, we did, last week, Council Mercia, we did the residential.
The residential would be less.
Right.
That's correct, Council.
And when we say the impact of the different options, like, let's say option 3, we never anticipated, we don't know yet about the change orders or they could be change orders, they could be cost overruns and different of these options that we haven't factored in yet. We don't know. So it's actually,
That's correct.
it's like an assumption.
That's right. These are based on the conceptual costs and do not factor in any unforeseen.
But there
change
will be a
orders.
contingency that is carried in the final budget that we would anticipate be sufficient to cover any change orders
change orders-
if approved, yes.
We don't know how much we're carrying in a accrued amount of money, right?
Council, in all likeliness, these numbers will change because these were numbers based upon square feet and, as you mentioned, assumptions for these conceptual plans at all the various options. So I think in large part, whether there's a wide variance or not, all these estimates will change.
So these are figures
Hopefully lower.
for commercial property for the people that are watching this at home. Residential was done some time ago.
Last week.
Which is a little less than what you see in here.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And I think what's important to note, even on both residential and these charts, are these online, Mr. Baldwin? They are, okay.
Yeah,
I think more light will be shed as we move forward and once the final numbers come in, we'll be able to change these, but at least for the time being, that's why I wanted to hold these, that, people can tune in, they can get the information, and I'm sure when it comes closer, people will take a look at these a little bit more closely. But what's good is that the current tax bill for some of these properties are in one column, and then the impact would be on top of that is in the other column. So I think this is going to be very helpful moving forward and as to what's affordable. So this is good. There's no other questions on this. I did ask Mr. Baldwin to bring forward our classification system, our tax allocation classification system, and how that works, especially for folks at home watching. So Mr. Baldwin, could you walk us through exactly when we say the shift, what that means and what we do, and it's allowed by the state, and why the state allows communities with a split rate to shift some of that burden to businesses?
So each year, there's allowable under the statute that I referenced earlier, an allowable amount up to 1.75 or 175% that can be shifted to the commercial class. In fiscal 17, a factor is determined by the assessor each year. This year it was 0.852218. I'll defer to Mr. Healy on the history of the rationale for the legislation, but essentially it allows communities where there's a large value in the residential class to shift it away from those residential properties where the commercial value isn't growing at a rate the same as the residential or for other things of that nature, so as not to unduly burden the residential class.
And for those who may be interested in ancient history, Proposition 2.5 did carry an interesting additional provision besides being a tax limitation. It also required that property be assessed at 100% of full and fair cash value. And all cities in Massachusetts had to come into compliance with that by fiscal 1984. And what that developed was an incredible shift onto the residential and away from the commercial, because what was happening was unofficial classification. And residential values were always held by boards of assessors artificially low. And therefore, the residential impact was less. There was a single tax rate, but if your value was lower than fair market value, you were paying less than your fair share. It was very artificial and unofficial, but Prop 2.5 clarified that and required 100% full and fair cash value, but also then allowed in later legislation, because of the tremendous impact back onto the residential, when everybody thought Prop 2.5 was a miracle, we're going to save money. They didn't, because the values grew to where they should be. And classification then was a legal means of splitting and benefiting the resident as much as was legally possible. So that's a long time ago.
That's very interesting. So, from a legal perspective, if I own a business, why can municipalities shift a greater portion of the tax levy, the tax burden, onto me as a business? What is the logic behind that? Because I mean, I don't have any children in the school system, but as a business person, I am benefiting from police and fire in the streets and snowplow, etc. I'm sure it was challenged.
It is state legislation, and most communities, obviously, because of their concern for residential, have adopted classification and adopted to the fullest extent. The rationale behind it, I think, is generally the one that we all recognize, that residents are greater in percentage voters than property business owners. The business owners vote somewhere, maybe in the community where they operate their business, but it just was a legislative reaction to the burden that Prop 2.5 created, or the 100% full and fair cash value created on the residential properties.
Very good. Just one other question. So, Mr. Baldwin, you did mention in your presentation earlier there was a time when we were we were trying to reduce our shift to a lower percentage. Is that correct? Or a lower rate? We always went to 175, but did we ever not? I thought there was some point during the Lynch administration where we started to. There was a reduction in the commercial tax rate.
Not that I'm
It was a
aware
dream.
of
It must have been a dream. Okay.
at this point.
I
There may have been
think at one
discussion.
point there was a shift in the percentage of the residential value to the commercial value, or the commercial value was growing less than the residential. When that happens, even with your maximum split, you're going to have a greater impact on the residential value.
Okay.
So I don't think there was a shift in the percentage of the classes of valuation is what happened.
Okay. That makes sense. I wasn't completely off base. Okay, well, we knew it was going to be, yeah, oh, Council, yeah, absolutely.
Just at the last Finance Subcommittee meeting, the subcommittee had asked for the median single-family home value. We were able to get that information. So it's very close to what the average was. But the median for fiscal 2017 was $239,000. And the tax on a property of that value would have been $3,565.88. Just by way of follow-up.
Do we know what that median number was? How many properties?
Well, we don't know how many would have fallen within
don't.
that range or thereabouts.
Okay.
But we can talk with the assessor
No,
about
but that's interesting. So the standard deviation really isn't much from the, it's not really much from the median. Pretty interesting. Good. Okay, my questions have been answered. I think this is helpful. It's on the website. People can take a look at it, businesses and residential homeowners as well. And then we'll just continue to move forward. Next meeting, we'd like to have on the debt service. I think that's going to be the most instrumental or the most helpful and informative on exactly how we will structure that. We'll bring a motion forward to request the motion by Councilman Milonazo, second by myself, to request the Chief Financial Officer to provide a schedule of TIFs that we have approved and the valuation that will come online in subsequent years. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and the opposed, that motion carries. Anything else? Council Mercy? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Connor Baldwin, how does new growth affects the tax rate, the tax new growth? It lessens the burden on everyone, right, when you have new growth. Do we have much new growth going on? Because it looks like there's so much building of properties,
Sure.
units of housing. I should have thought that would have had an impact to some degree.
You're exactly right, and as I'm sure you and everyone else in the city has noticed, there has been a flurry of activity since the economy's gotten a little better, so we have seen residential development and commercial development that has led to new growth. Typically,
But it hasn't got on the tax roll yet, are we saying that?
It has. It has. In part, a lot of personal property has contributed to new growth in each of the last 3 or 4 years. We've seen new growth in excess of our estimates. We typically try to be conservative in the area of, $1.75 to $2.5 million in growth. We've seen some years where growth has been over $3 million, but that does ease the impact as well, depending on whether it's added to the levy.
Thank you. That's
When you set the tax rate, the assessors from the Department of Revenue, what happens is anything in new growth adds to your total valuation.
Happen here.
So you have your tax levy and you have your total valuation, which results in a tax rate. The higher the valuation, the less the expenses, the lower the rate. And by, say the total value of the city is $5 billion, and there's 3.5 million in new construction. Well, that gets added to the number, and you therefore have a higher total value, resulting in distributing the burden across all of the taxpayers by a little bit less.
Yes, thank you. That's good to know.
Council Mercy, Council Milonazo has actually the new growth figures for the last 5 years.
We are seeing, and that was a very good question, Councilor Mercer. We did see the new growth for fiscal 13 was at about 1.3 million and 1.5 million fiscal 14. 15, it had a big jump to almost 3.2 million, and then 16 it went down to 2.2, then in 17 it went back up to 3.1 million in new growth. So it's been especially from 14 to 15 was almost doubled in new growth, and the dollar increase was substantial as well. So I can provide you a copy of this.
The thing is, we're running out of land and we're running out of space.
You can always build up.
Oh, all right.
Part of that new growth is additions and building permits being done and renovations where you have dilapidated buildings that are assessed at a low rate and so I mean there's always room for growth. And as Councilman, there was a big jump. I only had one question. So from fiscal year 14 to 15, there was a sort of significant decrease in new growth, and then from 16 to 17, there was a big jump. And in your chart, within your chart, there was not a big decrease in the residential property valuation. It was 10,000. Is there any idea what that drop was a result of from 15 to 16, and then it was back up from 16 to 17? No. Okay.
Fiscal 17 for the assessors was a recertification year required by the Department of Revenue, and those years tend to be a little more exact in the growth. You can use an assumed percentage of increase in values in the off years. Now, interestingly enough, the Municipal Modernization Act changed that 3-year certification to 5.
Oh, it's a 5.
So you will not see that full. It's not really a full revaluation because you're always supposed to stay, with the times, but it will be every 5 years now before you see that.
So as I think back now, I do recall, I think commercial property valuation was not growing at the rate it once was, so presumably that could have been a new growth.
And as Mr. Healy mentioned before, that creates sort of a natural shift towards the residential property.
Right.
And the goal is over the next 5-10 years, as we see construction everywhere, that we'll see a shift more from the residential back to commercial. So.
Okay. Good. All set. Motion to, anything else? Good, helpful. We'll bring it forward as a report of progress at the City Council meeting. Motion to adjourn by Councilman Malinowski, seconded by myself. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed?